Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very special event here at the Institut Français. It is a great pleasure to have you join us for an evening dedicated to the wonderful world of graphic novel and to celebrate the new volume of Miss Cat, recently published by Thames Anna Hudson. So tonight we're honored to be joined by three great figures in the world of graphic storytelling, Posy Simmonds, Jean-Luc Fromental, and Joëlle Jolivet. And together they represent the creative spirit that continues to push all boundaries of graphic novels, blending art, narrative, and visual expressions in ways that captivate readers worldwide. So Miss Cat, which we're here to discuss, is a beautiful example of this fusion with its very evocative illustrations paired with a compelling story. The book takes us into a world where art and narrative are really in harmony. And it's a book that speaks to both young and adult readers, to parents and children alike. Posy Simmonds is well known in this genre. She's the first British ever to receive the Grand Prix at the International Comic Festival in Angoulême. She had her own exhibition last year at Centre Pompidou and has been appointed Officier des Arts et Lettres in France. Her career overspanned different styles, from children's books to graphic novels to illustrations in newspapers and magazines. And her graphic novel, Gemma Bovary, which draws some parallels with Flaubert's Madame Bovary, has been adapted in a film. And we're very impatient to see the new exhibition dedicated to Posy, but you'll have to go to Angoulême for that in January next year. Jean-Luc Fromental is also one of the leading figures in the graphic novel world, and he has a unique ability to craft stories that resonate very deeply with readers. His works include The Seventh Man, the world's greatest comic, and they reveal his talent for creating narratives that are both thought-provoking and engaging. And Jean-Luc Fromental is also the editor of De Noël Graphic and has published Posy Simmonds in France. Jean-Luc's collaboration on Miss Cat adds a layer of storytelling finesse that is really captivating. And last but not least, Joëlle Jolivet is a renowned illustrator whose stunning work spans books, magazines, posters, and she brings her extraordinary artistry to Miss Cat. The illustrations are visual feasts, rich in detail and emotions. Joëlle's work really speaks for itself, often blending simplicity and intricacy in ways that make every page really come alive. So together, Joëlle and Jean-Luc bring Miss Cat to life, and this evening we'll explore their creative processes, the challenges and joys of graphic storytelling. Voilà, let's begin. Bonne soirée.
Do you want to say a word first?
Keep it. Yes. Otherwise, I will share. I'm going to share. I think we're going to begin by talking about how to construct. Am I sitting on it? Oh, I thought there was something.
I'll keep it all my life now.
I thought there was something strange. Anyway. Where were we? We're going to talk about the construction of a graphic novel, the inspiration, the pitfalls, the joys of doing it. I've already declared an interest that Jean-Luc is my publisher, which I'm very, very pleased about, and. We met now probably over
20 years, more than 20 years ago.
More than 20 years ago.
Today.
Yes, today. when my graphic novel Gemma Bovary was going to be published in French, and I was absolutely terrified because I'd taken liberties with Flaubert, and you were extremely comforting. Would you like to say something about?
Yeah, to put a frame on tonight's discussion. I mean, I think this whole thing is going to be a European salad, really. I mean, everything we do stems from Europe and from our culture, our common culture. And what struck me when I first read Gemma Bovary, which was brought from London Fair in 2000, I guess it was 2000, yes, by someone called Héloïse d'Ormesson, who was the daughter of the famous Jean d'Ormesson. She brought that book back, and she was a publisher, an editor at De Noël. I was not working there at the time, but they were friends of mine. My wife was working there, and she called me. She said, "You know a lot about comics. I don't know anything. So could you read this book and tell me what you think? And is it worthy to try it in France?" And I read it in one night, and the next morning I called her and said, "Buy it now. Don't even discuss. Take it, and it's a masterpiece." And that's how it started. And from there, a lot of things started, including the label that I have at De Noël, which is called De Noël Graphique, which is now in its 21st year. We celebrated the 20 years of its existence last year. And I started this label because of this book, because I thought the times were ripe in France after Art Spiegelman's Mouse, just before Marjane Satrapi, Persepolis, which was also a kind of milestone in the graphic novel history, and also because in the 80s, when I was working for Métal Hurlant, I published Will Eisner, A Contract with God, which is also considered probably the first modern graphic novel. And the whole story started like that. So in this aspect, Posy is directly the godmother of my series, of my collection at De Noël's. So it's really something very moving. And last year we were together a lot for the celebrations of the 20 years. It also stems from Europe, because Misha I met for the first time in Norway, where I was doing a publisher's trip, and I was introduced to a guy whose name was Øyvind Thorsæter. I don't know if he's known here, but he begins to be known in France. He was a great artist, and I was shown some of his stuff. And I fell in love with a little character in the back of a drawing on the background. And this character was a young girl wearing a hoodie with cat ears. And I don't know why I was struck by this thing, but it stayed with me, and I came back to Paris, and I decided I was going to try to write something with that little kid. And I wrote a short story which was far too serious for kids. Or I don't know.
Did you imagine, to begin with, it would be for children? Or for...
Yeah, I knew it was going to be for children, because the character itself was a young girl, and I thought, okay, that's a good, like your friend Gustave got into this woman's head. Yes. I thought I was going to become this little girl, and that was great and exciting. And I did that. And I discovered afterwards that that famous Øyvind Thorsæter, with whom I wanted to work, wouldn't speak any common language with me. I mean, for some reason, he was the only Norwegian not speaking English, and I don't speak Norwegian, so we couldn't collaborate.
But you decided it would be Scandinoir?
Not at the time. Not at the time. I hadn't read Jo Nesbø at the time yet. I didn't know about that. I was not too interested in the Scandinoir, which is the Scandinavian noir novels.
And then how did Joëlle come involved?
Joëlle asked me someday, do you have something in your files?
No, I think that you
okay.
told me about that book, and I was very jealous because he wrote it not for me. And so when I realized that 10 years after it was always in his, was not published, nothing with it, I asked him to read it because I was curious. And when I wrote it, I said, "Oh, but I want to do that. That's amazing. I love this story. I love this character." And our publisher was asking us to do something about young readers, so more story, illustrated story. And I think that it could be a new detective collection or something like that. And very quickly, we decided to make a more comic strip with it.
And actually, that's where Posy gets into the story again, because we tried to find something that was a cross between what we call les albums in French, which is the traditional children's books with written text and illustrations, and a narrative that borrows to comics with balloons and dialogues and things. And I thought, okay, I've got a model in my bookshelf, on my bookshelves, and it's Posy's books. And we decided to steal from that without warning her. Right. And she was fair. I mean, she never sent her lawyers. And
I didn't know. No.
You did. Yeah, that's why. I mean, and we did that. And our publisher Sophie Giraud, who was creating a company at the time, which is called Helium, liked it very much, and we started that, and it started as a series. It's not a long time ago, actually. We started when 3-4 years ago.
3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
I began. I had COVID. I remember it was a light COVID, so
wow.
I remember that I began to to organize the text, because the layout was not written for a comic strip, so I was very happy to do that for the first pages, and very quickly Jean-Luc was more. I was too slow. I was too slow, so he took the head again and rewrote the end of the story. But I think maybe because of. At the beginning, it was a story and not a comic strip. We kept this part of text. I think it's a mix of, and we connected it to your way of telling stories.
Yes, with text and followed by pictures and then important bits with balloons and so on. What I feel is that both of you two are just excellent in your own rights as writers and as an artist. And as collaborators, you seem to be terrific. But I wonder who is boss at some point.
It's like in couple. I mean, everyone is gonna say she's the boss, he's the boss, yes. Right?
So. Do you ever change anything? Or say, I really don't like that word, or?
No, I think he's trying to ask me always things more and more difficult to design. And I never say no, I can't. So.
A skiing octopus.
Yeah, a skiing octopus. The gods fighting in the sky with pizzas, things like that.
I think what is brilliant. Miss Cat is a cat, but she's also a sort of human being. And in the story, what is terribly funny is that sometimes she's a detective, a serious detective, a girl, but very often she's also a cat. So that this first book, which is the case of the canary, when Miss Cat gets hold of the canary, of course she licks her lips, and also she's extremely intrepid. She climbs trees and leaps from buildings like absolutely no one's business, because she has 9 lives. And I think these touches throughout, they're very, very funny.
The kids I saw in schools these last 2 days kept asking me, I mean, has she real cat ears under a hoodie? And I said, I don't know, and I don't want to know. As she got parents, I said, I don't know, and I don't want to know, but I got a theory. She's probably an abandoned child, and the parents were such morons that not leaving her in front of an orphanage, but in front of the Human Society thing, and she was raised as a cat. So that's why she thinks she's a cat. When I'm asked by adult journalists who she is, I give a reference which you probably don't know, which is Fantomette, which was a famous series of books for girls, basically, but I read them. I mean, I liked them quite. And she's Fantomette plus Greta Thunberg, right? I mean, she's got this incredibly strange behavior, and in my mind, she's a borderline child. She's not very communicative. She has a very few friends. One is a squid. The other one is a journalist that probably was hurt in a war or something, took a bullet and is in a chair now. So it's a rather depressing environment in whole. And the joy comes from the complexity of the stories.
The stories are absolutely, you don't know what's going to happen. This particular story does a kind of wonderful somersault at the end. And I won't tell you what happens. There's a truly horrible dog called Wolfgang, who's a very obese, what is he, a bulldog?
He's a sort of bulldog, I guess.
He's a sort of bulldog. And there's a very unpleasant, thin woman who's very suspect from the very beginning. Yes, like she speaks sibilantly.
Yeah.
She's
a serpentine woman.
A serpentine woman, that's a clue. And the joy of it also is the pictures of a kind of Scandinavia that, I mean, it looks familiar, but not. With very nice buildings, and the street scene where Miss Cat has her office I really like it. It's in a kind of old milk bar, as it should be for a cat. Is that, yes, there it is, with a weighing.
It's rather depressing, but you know, as London, Oslo, which is the model for the thing, is a very expensive city as far as real estate is concerned. So that's all she could get. But she's happy because there are old smells of milk that still float in the atmosphere of the milk shop, and she feels comfortable with it. That tells a lot about the character, I think. And the way to answer the question you ask, who's boss and who's contradicting,
yes.
It never happens like that. I have an experience, a long experience in TV and movie writing, and I know that every objection must be heard. So when Joëlle tells me, I don't think I understand exactly what's the motivation there and so on, I know I have to put it back on the working table and do something about it. But what I try always is to find a solution that satisfies both of us, and, as Joëlle said, to push her as far as possible in drawing impossible things. And that's where she's incredible.
Yes. And I mean, you've also written for bande dessinée as well. Yep. You've done Chaland and Loustal and
lots of
Stanislas
and Flock
and Flock and Simon, no?
now I'm working on Simenon, and that's another story completely. But Simenon's son, John Simenon, called me after I did a story inspired by an episode in his father's life. So I thought he was going to send his lawyers, but I'm lucky with lawyers, basically. And he said, I love the way you talked about my father. I mean, I showed his father going to the brothel with his mistress in the US. So I thought, oh, strange. And he said, I want to find someone who knows Simenon and understands Simenon to help me pass his work into the comics field. And that brings another level in our discussion, because that's where literature is going at the moment. You know, there's so many adaptations that are published in comics form, in bande dessinée form, of classic books, and you see that it's to prolong them, to kind of, you know, make them survive to the new century, towards new audiences. And now adults read books, as your books prove. I mean, you must be an adult, and you must be learned to appreciate Gemma Bovary, for example. I mean, all the fun with Flaubert. Right?
When I ask young people, you know, about Flaubert, or have they read Madame Bovary, they usually say, oh, what an absolute cauchemar, she is a mother. And then they say it's too long, there's too much description, and etc.
And Flaubert nearly got cancelled because of the way he speaks of women, right?
Oh, well, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I was going to ask Joëlle that for this book, I mean, in a lot of your books, you use gravure or you use lino cuts. That this book, you have a very free line drawing. And is that something you've done a lot, or that you do any? I mean, I've seen your sketches there, so you must do quite a lot with a pencil. But was this a first thing where you used a stylo, a pen?
I always be between a lino cut, which is very rigid and very comment dire, contraignant, demanding, yeah, and the freedom of the sketch. And I always sketch all the time, and I think that each book for me has, I have not a vision, but a way of drawing it different. It's like the right music instrument for to sing a song. So I don't know. I think immediately, maybe because of Torseter. I hope no, because I try not to look at his drawings too much. But for me, North is thin line. I don't know why. And I discovered this very, very thin stylo, pencil, and I loved it to change totally.
Does it have a name?
The stylo,
yes,
it's a Japanese one.
So
no, it was very common pen, but now it's difficult to find. But it's like a Rotring. It's very thin.
Yes.
And I don't know. I can't explain. It's different from the others. So, and I think at the beginning I tried with brushes, with a brush and more black thing, because Fantomette was my first idea when he told me about Miss Cat. I said, okay, it's a black cat with on like Catwoman or something like that.
Musidora.
Voilà,
Yeah.
Musidora. And Jean-Luc told me, no, absolutely not. She's a grey cat. She's very thin and transparent, and she's very fragile. And so I took this very fragile pen to draw her. I think it
gives it
instinct. Something.
It's got a very nice pace to it, the book. And can you tell me a bit about the colour? Did you do that on yourself?
Oh yes, but it's digital.
It's digital.
It's digital because I always, I never have original drawings like you, very nice colors, watercolor. I'm not good with that, and I always separate the colors because of I think the print habit. So I always draw everything in black, and it turns into colors when it's printed. So I'm not very je suis pas très à l'aise avec. I'm not very comfortable with painting.
With painting.
And digital painting. It's a kind of digital painting. I found a brush, digital brush, just one. I always use the same one, and I try to use very few colors because it's a grey world. It's the northern world.
Yes, the color palette is quite somber, but in the case of the canary, the yellow.
Very simple. Yeah.
The yellow
I always try
out.
to use the less color I can.
Yes.
To be.
Well, it's very Scandinois. In fact, I was going to
Yeah,
ask.
and I try to create a mixed Scandinavian. I don't know anything about Northern Europe. I've never been there. I think I don't think I would like to go there, but I'm not sure it's a good idea because for me it's an imaginary world.
It's in your imagination.
And mixed. I try always to mix Norwegian, Swede, and even in the words, in the fake words, I mix the three languages to make a new one. And what is very funny is that it was published in Denmark. And they found, why did you put this O with this O?
The barred O,
the barred
yeah.
O, not at the right place.
We use it as a running gag, actually, and I don't think the Norwegians like it very much because it's making fun of their complicated language.
It comes from Asterix, actually, I think.
And they got two languages. It's hell. I mean, there's Bokmal and old whatever, and it's depending on the regions, they speak different languages in Norway. So it's a bit complicated.
It's complicated.
If I may brag. Oh, you had a question.
No, when we were talking about the visualizing, I was going to ask you, do you, when you're writing, do you also have do you visualize how it might look?
Oh, I'm stuck on Google Earth and whatever you find now in the internet. You don't have to travel anymore. That's the good thing. I mean, it's no more a time for Peter Fleming or people like that, because you don't have to go there and catch whatever disease there is. You just sit in front
I know very well Oslo because of Google.
Yeah, and it's incredible because you can steal from the architecture and achieve incredible effects doing that. But I must brag about something, a question you asked. Yeah. It's partly because of me and because I have this theory about artists that they always hide behind their style. They're shy and it takes a very long time to get an artist to show his or hers naked drawing. Really, I mean, yes. And the lino cuts or whatever were, of course, something incredibly efficient with Joëlle, but also a way of hiding a natural drawing. And what we did with Misha was to bring out what's behind that woodcut technique, which makes things a little stiff, and which is good for certain books. The penguins were done in.
But yes, the process is more laborious,
and I think it's it works for some books, but for Jean-Luc, what Jean-Luc write for me is too fast to.
Oh yeah, right.
To live alive, if I don't know how to say, but
when you do documentary books, like the human body clear, and things like that,
very simple, very clear, but it doesn't fit with the.
But I insist because I work with a lot of artists, and I noticed my friend Mai Simon, who's an American artist, has also this thing of adding stuff just to hide behind it. I mean, it's just because the natural drawing is always the most free and the most beautiful.
But
and then
I think there is a sort of rule that the rough drawings that you do are always the best ones. And when your editor or whoever it is says, "That's lovely, can you do it just bigger and, add colour?" It's never the same. It just sort of, it dies.
And then it's the same for writing, There's a famous sentence by a writer, Isaac Babel, the Russian guy, who says the sentence must lay on in your poem like a lever, and once it's written, you allowed a quarter of turn left or right, and that's it. Don't touch it more. And another writer said, "I know my book is finished when I have corrected all my sentences and then went back to the first sentence." So it's a lesson, and a lesson in trust in your brain and your instinct of
Yes.
artist, right?
Yes.
And you do that too. There's immense work in your work, but in the end, what's left is what came out first, and it feels like that when I'm familiar with your sketches and things, and it's incredible. And what you did with literary life under pressure is incredible. It's I'm sorry, I'm flattering you now.
I'm guessing I might have to have a drink. Literary Life was a weekly strip that I did in The Guardian, in the Guardian's Saturday literary thing. It was very interesting because knowing anyway the world of an illustrator, of illustrators, and also knowing other authors. Oh, there it is.
It's a famous one.
It's my favorite one.
Yes. So I did that about being an illustrator, because I know no illustrator who does books or writes books for children, either illustrates or does both, who isn't asked things like, are you going to do something serious sometime? Or I expect you want to go on the adult side, and I have been asked things like, who thinks of your ideas? And can you draw properly if you want to? It's usually about, you're going to do something properly serious. Have you been asked that?
Oh yes, and actually, it's incredible that so many children illustrators are so great designers, are so great drawers, and not considered as drawers and artists. And it's so sad, because I think because it's on the children part, it doesn't work. It's not good enough.
I'm going to protest that. I come from comics. I mean, that was my first love, and before I got into publishing and publish serious books. I mean, what's his name? Stephen King. It's not serious, but it's novels, And I was convinced that comics were safe because they were considered a literature for morons. People, as Charles Schulz would say, that move their lips while reading, right? And we were preserved from every, Vanity Fair that goes around the publishing world and so on. And now it's changing rapidly, and I see it as a great danger. I'm very much in favor of the graphic novel, and I publish serious books. I publish Alison Bechdel, who's a feminist American woman whose books are incredibly great. I published Spanish authors. I publish. We do topical, serious books with a subject matter and a gravitas that really bears like literature on the readers. So it's great, but there's a danger to that that we saw happening. It didn't happen so much in the English or American writing world, but in France it became so personal with autofiction and things like that, that suddenly, I mean, the great telling, the great novels, the common tales disappeared from the literature in favor of personal, very small stories, very little bits. I won't name names, but there are people that I can't stand because they concentrate on their own little, bloody things that are boring and after a while so repetitive that you can stand to even talk to them. So, our strength was to be the thing that was ignored by the critics and everything. I'm not nostalgic of that, but I keep saying that there's a kind of danger around it to become too official, too sophisticated, too...
No, it's not only that, it's just to recognize the quality of the drawing, of the line.
But it's the case now, and it started with, when we started, that's where we met, with Le Seuil Jeunesse in the 80s. Because at the time, I mean, the art was absolutely refusing everything that was figurative. And the people went, some of them came from the comics, because the comics were on a downhill at the moment. I mean, at the time, at the end of the 80s and 90s, there was a sort of crisis in France, and there were less work for the comics artists, and also for the painters and so on. So they kept coming to the children's book, and masterpieces were done at that point, and incredible books. Our friend Jacques Binstock did incredible books at that time, right? So it was a refuge for the figurative artists. Yeah. And
do you think it? You were talking about the books that you don't like, but also, I mean, the great explosion of bande dessinée everywhere. Do you think it's a shame that comics have sort of lost their subversive character? I mean, I remember when I was a child, you were supposed to read books and you were allowed comics, but you were supposed to grow out of them. They were for children. And that's what astonished me, that, when I went to Paris, say in the 80s, you'd go into Fnac and you'd see children on the floor reading comics and their parents reading bande dessinée. And it was extraordinary. And you could buy bande dessinée comics in the supermarket. So it was sort of eye-opening. And here, where we've caught up a lot, I think. Would you think that?
I think you're one of the ones that helped along with Alan Moore and people like that, to regain the lost time, because you didn't have what we had in France, which was the genius of a man called René Goscinny, who was the creator of Asterix.
Asterix, yes.
And he created a magazine that was called Pilote, and Pilote grew with his readers. When I started to read Pilote, I was 10. When Pilote disappeared, I was about 20, and it stopped. They folded and they stopped publishing. But at the time, I mean, they made us adult comics readers.
Yes.
Did
you read comics when you were?
I'm not the same generation. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
A little bit younger.
I mean,
not so much, but a
your
little
generation.
bit younger. Yeah. No, I'm from the generation of the l'association. That means that in the beginning of the 90s, where I'm sorry with this autofiction also, but a new I grew with Pirou and children magazine, children comic strip magazine. I read a lot of comic strips when I was a child, but comic strip for children. And I discovered Corto Maltese and Hugo Pratt in Pif Gadget, who was really a magazine for children.
Communist children.
Communist children, yes. And at the beginning, I didn't like this black and white thing, and very quickly, it's incredible because you can enter in a new world with this. In the same magazine, you have a PIF, which is not very interesting drawing, and Corto Maltese. That's crazy. And after that, I read Pilote, I think, and À Suivre, and not so. I'm sorry, not Metal Hurlant, not so much, because he was director.
Was my gang.
The last director of Metal Hurlant.
It was my gang.
Yeah, and I think I missed this moment. No, it's not that I missed because I choose the children edition more than the comic strips. I could have made comic strip in the early 90s, but I was not able to write stories, to write my own stories. That I need a scenarist. And I was more in the part of the graphic things, so the children books were more interesting for me to create objects more than stories. So maybe that's why I choose this way, not the way of the comic strip. But it was an incredible moment of growing, creating new things, creating new way of publish books, new way of edit. Comment dire, enfin, je trouve pas le mot en français, mais pas de créer, mais de fabriquer des nouveaux livres, quoi, en fait. To
create new kinds of books. Yeah.
Kinds of things.
That's what I said. I mean, and also because there was a crisis in comics.
That's the same thing 10 years before, but I was not...
with Arlene Quist, for example.
I mean in the comic strip as well, but I was not...
Coming back to Miss Cat, Miss Shah, can you tell me how it was put together? I mean, there was a text, there were...
it's Suicide Alley. We jump from the building. And that's what I love doing.
We always do that.
Yeah. Not always. I mean, sometimes I plan, I do, pitches.
I don't remember you wrote an entire story.
I work for TV, so I can tell you when you work for TV, you got to tell the same story about 20 times in front of different audiences, composed generally of stupid people who don't understand, as you saw in Miss Cat, because the first thing the lady who wanted to make a cartoon out of Miss Cat, she came and she said, what we could do is give her a pet animal. When I was a kid, I had a little mouse in my pocket, and when I had troubles, I would tell my troubles to my little mouse. And I answered her, and I think that stopped the negotiation. I said, if she has a mouse in her pocket, it's like having M&Ms for her, and she's going to eat the mouse exactly the moment she has a thought about the mouse, right? And that stopped the whole thing. So you see that I'm a guy of compromise, because I had to go through that for 20 years in my life with French television, right? But there, the way we work, and we work like that because we know each other very well, and we respect each other as creators.
And I trust him. Yes.
She trusts me, and I trust her. So that's the great thing.
And do you do a storyboard?
I don't have the time to do storyboards.
You don't have time to do a storyboard.
I'm always running,
behind him. So having done your croquis, your sketches...
I make storyboards because kind of storyboard because I organize the text and then I make sketches, of course. But it's not... at the beginning I made storyboards for the first one because I had enough to do it. But sometimes it's one page before one page after the other one. No.
And do you get when you have a spread or a page? Do you have the text already printed out so you know how much room the text... Yeah.
She works like you. She works exactly like you do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I organized
Yes.
the images, the pictures around the text, because sometimes I ask him to, maybe you could cut a little bit because it's too long, but it's important.
Do that very gracefully.
Have you, with your experience in television...
Do you ask yourself, maybe you could cut a little bit the text? You do that?
Well, I
to
do
yourself?
I do it. I do it to myself. Yes, that's
schizophrenia. It's called.
I know. My other.
And what
half.
do you answer to yourself?
Yes. I know what I do. If I don't want to draw something, but it has to be there, I either say I have a hedge or something, so you can say, she could just hear the sound of the combine harvester behind the hedge. So you don't have to draw the combine harvester. Yeah. Or it was too dark to see the...
Suddenly she saw the smoke from the engine.
Yes, the engine or something. There was a spiral staircase, but unfortunately it was too foggy to...
Louise was doing science. I'm sorry, this is happening backstage. But
there are questions.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, of course,
but
of course.
Then, no, stop. Just 1 minute. I want to do something. I want to introduce this because this is part of the conversation. And this is my proudest achievement lately, which is Posy, as you know, got the Grand Prix in Angoulême, which is very important. It's the equivalent of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, really. I mean, there are only 50-something people admitted in that thing. It's the Academy of Comics. She's the first British person, all genders confounded, accepted in this thing. Alan Moore nearly had it, but finally he didn't make it to the end. And for the circumstance and for the fact that we're going to have a large exhibition of Posy's work after Pompidou in Angoulême this year, I decided that we're going to publish something. And this is a book by Posy, which is a collection of stories for children. And it's a very interesting thing, I think, that I'm trying to do, which is by putting 5 stories together, trying to give a classic ring to the book and to show this is an oeuvre in itself, and that it's crucial if you want to understand how Posy evolved from a newspaper or magazine artist into a complete author, because this is how she, I guess, walked the distance between the two by creating stories that were short but complete and only of her own making, without trying to talk to readers of a certain kind and so on. What do you have to say about this?
I think we should have some questions. Thank you.
For Posy.
Yes, that lady there.
Oh, you want that? Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask, because I was wondering when you were going to mention Corto Maltese, because he has been really a landmark. And here in England, nobody knows him. And my husband, who is a publisher, tried in the 90s to publish him. And it fell completely in a hole. And at that time, in England, you didn't have graphic novels. It just didn't exist. And I wanted to say to Jean-Luc that I was a scout, so I was Eloise scout. For many years. My name is Kukla Maklehuis.
Oh,
so
yeah,
we know each
Kukla.
other. Yeah. and the first book of Posy I sent. Yeah.
Behind this?
Yeah.
Jesus.
and the first book I remember reading of you, which was so funny, was a woman who is completely can't see anymore. She has a fuzzy vision. That was a sort of comic, graphic. No, it wasn't? You don't. It was before Gemma. You didn't do that, or maybe it was it was in the paper.
Oh, True Love.
Yeah.
From a long time ago, from the
It was
80s.
a very long
Oh
time.
my God.
Yeah.
It was
Anyway.
the first
Yeah.
graphic novel by Posy, which was part of the serial or of the soap opera.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was
Yes.
the first one I remember.
Yes, I forget it.
recommending.
Forget
Yeah.
it.
So, but Corto Maltese still here.
It's
is
not published,
a non-entity, and nobody knows him.
but it's not published in
Well, you can find on eBay probably the copies published at the time by the Harville Press,
But as Joëlle said, it took quite a long time to impose it in France and to impose Hugo Pratt as a major artist, because and that's why it was published. That's why it was published in Pif le Chien, which was a magazine really for children and not at all the place for that thing, except for the discriminating
it
kids.
was in the middle of other realistic black and white.
Black and white
but
stuff, but not
at
at
the
the
same
same level.
level.
Yeah,
Of course.
exactly.
anyway.
Anybody else?
It's kind of picking up from what we're talking about in terms of even that comic behind, in terms of comics being seen as something for children, something that is not really proper art or whatever. It's definitely something that I feel it's here in this country, but I'm kind of surprised to hear that you had it in France as well, because there is a difference. I think that there is, like you, Posy, were saying before, you go to France and you see the space that is given to bande dessinée in general is incredible. There is a respect, I think, that the French people have for comic authors that the British don't have. I'm from Italy. I'm kind of, I think that we are sort of halfway in between, probably, between Great Britain and France, even in terms of book sales. I know that comics in France are about 12%, I think, of the general book world. I think it's about 0.2 in England. I mean, it's quite a difference. So why do you think that is? What is there must be some sort of cultural history reason for this difference, why does France have this respect and love and England doesn't have?
I remember you saying something like it was to do with the end of the Second World War and the fact that there were a lot of American comics from the American army. I mean, maybe you can enlarge on that. I mean, I'm very interested to know why. Yes, why has it taken root in Belgium as well? I mean,
there's a good reason why the European comics, bande dessinée, are called Franco-Belge, right? Because all the greats, for a while, were in this golden triangle, which was between Marcinelle and Brussels, which was where you had Franquin, the guy who did Spirou, Hergé, the guy who did Tintin, Jacobs, the guy who did Blake and Mortimer. And I think it's a tradition, and I think it's because children you can't read very well comics when you haven't read them when you were a child. And you can't read comics when you become an adult and you've read comics and you don't find the stuff that you need as an adult. This was a drama for most of these greats. Hergé finished his life in bitterness somehow, because he thought he was not estimated at the level that he deserved. Franquin went into a bad depression and lost his touch when he was trying to do this thing which is called Idée Noire, which is great, but not as great as what he did for us kids at the time when he was doing Spirou and the Marsupilami and Gaston Lagaffe and things like that, because there was no way to transport your preoccupation as a growing and aging artist into your medium at the time. And now what's changed is that with the graphic novel, You can deal with matters that concern you as a grown-up, as an adult, and have the means of expressing it to people who are readers, who accept they're not the readers of comics, exclusive reader of comics. They buy novels, they buy everything. But if you can reach them, there's a huge discrepancy between the printing of my different books in my collection, and all my colleagues live the same thing, you know. You can hit the 200,000 mark with a Johann Sfar book, and then go down to 200 with another one, lesser known person, artist. So it's exactly like literature. It works exactly the same way, the difference between Jonathan Coe and whoever. I mean, so it's a changing market, it's a changing field. I think it's going to get European. I think it's going to get more than that, because hybrids are appearing everywhere. Now the French artists are reading the Japanese artists, reading the comics, and there's a kind of linguo, if I can call that like this, who's developing, which is the graphic language for a graphic and visual century. And my idea is that when you're in a dominant language, and for me, the actual dominant language of the times is basically the CCTV, if you want. The only way of resisting is to speak the same language, but in a personal and individual way. And the artists that do that stuff speak against the official language with the same thing, which is images. And we saturated in images, but the comics are still lonely voices, because the style is making the difference. And that's why AI is such a concern with the comics, you know, because AI is a stupid, disastrous language of ripped off stuff, mixed in a mash, and reserved as vomit, I'm sorry to say, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, there's a very striking example of bande dessinée for adults, a very early one, which is La Bête est morte, which was published clandestinely in 1942 or 3, I think, and then published in French just at the Libération, and also published in English, actually, very early on. And that's a very striking example of bande dessinée with a very adult theme. And I was wondering if any of you had read it in your childhood, and you know.
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
No, I read it, I think.
No, it was not available when I was a kid, because people tended to erase everything that had to do seriously with the war. But you know, it's funny you name it, because it's the first comics ever that mention the deportation of Jews.
Exactly.
The Jews are being rabbits, and the Nazis being wolves.
And it inspired actually Mouse afterwards. Yes, and it's the very first image of that, and that was actually published clandestinely during the war. So that's quite extraordinary.
Strangely enough, the two clandestine books of the war, which is the Silence of the Sea by Vercors. Vercors is also an artist and an illustrator under the name of Jean. What's his name? Jean Brulaire, voilà, merci. And Calvo, of course, did that too. So it's interesting that already at the time the art of drawing was resisting, even though with words in the.
I read it as a child, and I had a copy of it at my uncle's house, I think. I knew
if you still have it, you're a millionaire now.
I know, but I don't know what it is. That could be. I'm going to look at it.
No, I mentioned it because my father had it as a child in the 50s as well, and so I know that it has been an example that people were actually reading of bande dessinée with very, very hard themes, and I think that might have influenced as well how later on in France bande dessinée was used for more difficult maybe themes.
to see those as, you know, historically, that's really important for that to be published or to be known across Europe. I think it's especially now that we see those, but I don't know the book. Like Posy Simmonds, I've never heard of this, and I've lived in France for many, many years, and I didn't know it. It seems an important comic to see, really interesting.
Oh, you mean La Bête est morte? Yeah, it's available now. It's been republished in the 70s, I guess, by Étienne Robial.
By
And
Futuropolis.
can you
Oui,
say
Étienne Robial.
can you say the author again?
I think it's not available anymore.
La Bête est morte.
La Bête est morte, mais it's by who?
Calvo.
Calvo, right. That's
C-A-L-V-O.
The Bibliothèque Nationale is trying to, is buying the originals now, and they are made comment on dit, une subscription to buy all the original. The originals were in the exhibition in Beaubourg, the comic strip exhibition.
There's an actor who's trying to turn that into an animated movie. Mathieu Kassovitz has been trying to produce it and never succeeded. But there was a very important, very strange exhibition for which I did a catalogue a few years ago at Le Mémorial de la Shoah in Paris, which was called Shoah and bande dessinée, which was sort of strange. but it was a great exhibition, and it was showing that, for example, the first comics in the US that evoked the camps, except from a few Superman stories, but they never really get into what was happening inside the camps. It was the Germans, the Nazis were the baddies, and he would go there and kick some ass, but not really touch the question, the real question. But the first one was by an American artist whose name escapes me right now, that was published in EC Comics, which was a scandalous comics that you read when you were a kid.
Yes.
That's the pressoir thing, you know?
Yes.
She was traumatized by that.
I read a lot of British comics when I was a child, but because when I was a child, it was just after the war. In the village where I grew up, there were a lot of American USAF families, and their children went to the same school as I did. Every Saturday, they'd go off to an airbase in their enormous cars, and they would return with things I'd never seen, like Coca-Cola, not Coke, and cookies, and enormous piles of comics. So when they'd finished with their comics, they would give them to me. So for a time, I was the proprietor of piles of 1950s Superman, Spider-Man, and my mother threw them away. But among these were horror comics as well. And I can remember I was about 8, and I was reading a comic, and I went, oh God. Oh no, I didn't say, oh God. I went, and my mother said, what are you reading? And she took the comic, and it was a picture of a man being squashed to death in an olive press. And she was absolutely horrified. She said, where did you get this, you know? She thought comics were for children. She'd never sort of thought that, you know, children were going to be. But that, I suppose that's when my love of comics began. But I mean, I like the subversiveness of comics. I also like the fact that they're a very democratic medium. That you know, if you've got a pen and a piece of paper, or you've got a laptop, you can, or an iPad, you can fire away.
The press, olive press, pops up in one of your books in the form of a stampede by cows in Tamara Drew, right? So yes. Nothing is ever lost.
Nothing is lost.
We have time for one last question, and then we'll wrap up.
So you mentioned Spiro earlier on. I didn't.
Yes.
You mentioned Spiro And like that is such a massive comic in France and Belgium. Like it was one of the biggest rivals to Tintin. But it just never has caught on in Britain as much as Tintin and Asterix. Like those are the two big bande dessinées. But Spirou is nowhere near as well known as them in Britain, even though it's like one of the most major comics in France and Belgium. So what I want to know was there a particular reason why it didn't catch on well? Or is it just more of a problem with Britain itself? Like why is this comic that is so well known in France and Belgium influenced an art style as well, is just not known in Britain and it's really hard to find?
The answer is protectionism. Protectionism? Is that it? I mean, you've been, I work in cartoons, and I can tell you, you've been terribly defensive of whatever was coming from abroad, right? And I think that's one reason. But the other thing is that Spirou is totally different from Tintin. Tintin was well behaved. If you want, Tintin was rather the Beatles as compared to Spirou, that could be the Rolling Stones. When I was a kid, I was reading Spirou. I loved Tintin in itself, but not the magazine, which was too well behaved, too well coiffed and whatever. So,
but I think that Spirou is not published nowhere, except in. It's not.
It's translated in the Catholic Romans countries for some reason.
Italy and
in Spain, they know Spirou better than in England, and it never made it here. You're right. I mean, but so many things never made it here. You know, we try as publishers. I can tell you, we try to push our authors, and it's very seldom that we manage to impose one here. When the other way around, I mean, we take whatever you sing, we bring, right? I mean, really, it's amazing people like your friend Raymond Briggs, for example, made his print in France with the When the Wind Blows and books like that, or Quentin Blake illustrators and so on, and they're well loved. But
Raymond Briggs's When the Wind Blows has just been reissued in French.
Yeah,
fashion in the 90s. There was many British illustrators, but not anymore. I think not so much. Like Colin Hawkins or.
Colin Hawkins. I work with Colin Hawkins. I don't know what became of him.
Babette Cole and published by Albin Michel mostly.
Yeah. But you know, it's strange because it's basically it's you're right, cultural differences that prevent some things to, and it's very hard to analyze why, really.
At the back. We have a last question here.
Yes, at the back.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Really? Give the man a mic, because it's amazing.
Yeah, we have with Valerie here. We publish. We are a Cinebook publisher, so we publish Lucky Luke, Black and Mortimer, Spirou, and all the major French, Belgian comic books into English. We sell them all over the world. We just wanted to show that it was possible to sell French, Belgian comic books in the world in English. We sold over 1 million copies. So I think nobody can say anymore that they are not sold in English language. Thank you.
Thank
Bravo.
you.
Thank you. On that note, thank you so much to Jean-Luc, Joëlle, and Posy for a wonderful and fascinating discussion. They very kindly accepted to sign books at the back of this room, and they're available to buy downstairs in the foyer. Thank you so much again, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.